Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And the other night I was privileged to be on the Knife Nuts, what did they call it? Friends Giving, like extravaganza or whatever. And one of the topics that came up for discussion there are trends in the knife world that we don't really like and we're happy to see going. And I probably should have said this on that show at the time, but there are some pictures of me out there that I'm not super proud of, where where I bought into the foolish trend. Luckily, I had short hair, so it wasn't super difficult to kind of get back to reality. Anyway, there are some pictures out there of me with frosted tips, and it looked terrible. And it was stupid. I was a teenager, so stupid is as stupid does. Um, Nonetheless, today I want to talk about some further trends, or I want to expand on the discussion from the Knife Nuts Friendsgiving about trends in the knife world that I'm kind of, either glad are gone or would like to see go away. And one of the things that I mentioned at that time, I don't really have any here, so I can't tell you, but anyway, here's what I thought I would do. I wanted to combine this discussion, and I'm going to do my best. I'm probably going to blow it because I'm trying to pull too many things together at once. But I wanted to do a most carried for fall of 2021, along with trends that I am glad are going away or would like to see go away. And the first one, the one that I mentioned on the show, by the way, all of these knives are on my most carried list. But one of the very first thing that I mentioned when asked on the show was the front flipper. And I mean, I don't dislike front flippers per se, but I don't find a lot of joy out of them either. They seem to require me to put my hand in kind of an awkward position to get them to open well. I recently had this guy show up. You may have already watched my first impressions on this, and it's a front flipper, and it's okay. But I find that now, by the way, the saving grace here is that it is flickable because of the fuller there. But the front flipping, one, it tends to wear out the inside of my thumb on a lot of front flippers. And two, I feel like I have to reposition my hand to a greater degree than I do with a regular back flipper or even a Spidey flick. So front flippers are one of those things that I would like to see go, with the exception that there are some knives where they work. Now, since we're talking about flippers, I thought I'd go in a completely different direction and point out these were two of my most carried knives for the fall. The Para 2 is always great, and I've had this one for a long time, and I find this is a great knife to carry for work, for anything where you might get a little bit sweaty. It's highly stainless, it's highly reliable, it's lightweight, so you don't really notice that you've got it with you. And the Para 2 is great for that, as is the Manix 2 Lockback. Absolutely fantastic cutting tools that I just feel like I don't really have to worry about, and they'll just do their job when I need them. And then the rest of the time, I don't even notice that I've got them. Now, moving on to the next trend, it's serrations. Serrations and glass breakers. Now, Bearded Gear brought this up, and I wanted to say amen sort of at the end of his at the end of his points there. There's still sort of an effort, to make knives like tactical. And now a knife can be a tactical tool. It can be a self-defense option. It can be a survival option. And so I get that, but putting a glass breaker here does not make a lot of sense to me. Number one, because of the way you're going to have to use it. If you've ever tried to break a window from inside of a car, it's not that easy. I would recommend anyone who's watching this, go get a Rescue Me, put it on your keychain. I put one on my keychain, and I also keep one on a zip tie tied to the sun visor of every car that I'm around. And I convince my friends to do the same thing. So I see a lot of Rescue Me's clipped to visors. that is a tool that will work from inside the car. It doesn't require a big swing of the arm. You're not likely to end up cutting yourself. Just remember, once you do it, you need to place it right in the corner of the window. And then when you push, when you go to actually do that braking motion, close your eyes or cover your eyes to make sure that you don't get don't get glass in your face. If you're in that situation where you've got to break a window to escape, a little bit of glass in your eye versus dying either in a car fire or sinking underwater or something is probably a trade-off most of us are willing to make. But just wanted to throw that out there, that the added tactical features, the seatbelt cutter, the glass breaker, the serrations, those are all things I could do without. And you really get a partially serrated blade is like the worst of both worlds. Now, a full serrated blade, that works really well. Thinking of blades, let's go on to my next most carried. This, of course, is a Spyderco Amalgam. Before I get to why I love it, I'll just say, if you need a serrated blade, get a fully serrated blade. It's easier to sharpen, and it will do the job that you need to do better. And then when you don't need it, you can carry just a regular standard blade. So Spyderco Amalgam, why do I love it so much? Ergonomics. This is one of the most comfortable knives I own, and it's very comfortable in hand. It allows me to choke up, but it's also really, really lightweight for its size. So I've got this big substantial cutting tool that doesn't weigh a lot. Like, you really don't notice this to any more significant degree than you do these other two Spydercos that we already covered. And so for those reasons, I really, really like this, and I carry it a whole lot. And we've talked about the fact that, the detent could be a little stronger. Nonetheless, this is still phenomenal. All right, so that's number 3 of my most carried knives, and number 3 of the trends I wish would die are recently there have been some knives. James Brand has done this for a while. As have some others. There's this sort of weird hipster vibe that is especially, I think, promulgated by like Instagram, where people just love to take these pictures of their knives on a leather background and like teak wood, and put a pocket knife a pocket watch in the picture. And I just go, come on, a knife is a tool. And it needs to, I don't know. And it's not that I dislike hipsters or those who have that style, but if you're coordinating all your gear so that the leather on your shoes matches the color of your knife and, ties in with the band around your fedora, I don't know. I just can't tolerate much of that, and I don't follow many of those channels. I'm happy that more people are coming into the knife world, don't get me wrong, but I kind of would like to see the sort of hipster aesthetic fade from the knife community, and I wouldn't complain if it did. All right, next up, there was a discussion of, I guess I'm kind of going back and forth between these. So Ariat K4. This is a knife that I've wanted for a long, long, long time. When Justin got some in stock over at White Mountain Knives, I jumped on it really, really quickly because this has been on, way back when they first released the K series. I wanted this. I've wanted it ever since, and I've never been able to actually handle one and spend some time with it. So when I got the chance, I was all over it, and I've been carrying it quite a bit just to make up for all that lost time that I hadn't been able to carry it. It's a great knife, snappy action, attractive, interesting. I love the blade grind on this. Now my camera doesn't want to work. There we go. And I fingerprinted it up a little bit, but I'm not going to stop and clean it because we've got a bunch of other knives to look at. But I do enjoy this an awful lot. It does bring me to the next knife that I want to touch on, and that is the Inkosi. This has been in a lot of these videos. It's going to continue to be in a lot of these videos, but it brings up another trend that I'm glad to see go, and one that was brought up on the show as well, and that is the hard use trend. And specifically what I didn't like about that trend, and I got a lot of sort of hard-ish use knives, and that is all they did, it would be a hard use knife because there was thick blade stock and thick slabs of titanium or thick whatever they made it out of, and that was it. All right. if you want to make a hard use knife, you need to make a blade that's ground appropriately. You need to make hardware that's oversized and thick and heavy duty that can't be easily worn out or sheared off. You need, and by the way, the Inkosi does all of this. And this knife tied into that trend, but sadly, but tied into that trend, but didn't really go all the way, and that's what was good about it. Instead, they made a really hard use knife that's still slim and carryable and comfortable. That doesn't look like this massive thing. That is rather quite comfortable and easy to deal with. The next trend so that was the hard use trend. This is the most carried knife, and those two happen to go right along with each other. All right, so I guess one of the reasons I love this knife so much, I should say before I switch it out, is that it's hard use without buying into all of the cliches that kind of became a part of that whole hard use trend, which I am kind of glad to see go. Now, next knife on the list, again, this knife is probably going to always be on this list. It's one of the best folding knives in existence, M4 steel, G10. This is just a fantastic knife. Now, it's equally fantastic with the Griptilian and with the Hogue MK1, I guess G2 is what it is these days. But these are all very similar knives, and they're all really good. I happen to like this one because of the color scheme, because of the M4 steel, because of the size, the blade profile. There are a couple little things that this does, I think, a little better than the other two options. Nonetheless, I don't want to take anything away from those other knives. They're really good too. But the M4 steel here reminds me of the next trend, and that is D2. For a while there, it was every single folding knife, every company was putting it on their knives, and I get it. From a user standpoint, D2 is a good edge retention steel for a fairly reasonable price point. From that perspective, okay, great. But I just got so tired of seeing it on every single folder. And it was like, for a couple, 2, 3, 4 years there, all of these Chinese companies were making, folders with, it was like every single knife has a flipper, a D2 blade, and ceramic bearings in the pivot. And it was like, come on, can we do something different? Now, luckily, we're moving a little bit away from that, and we're seeing other steels, and we're seeing, in fact, we're seeing companies develop their own steels, which is pretty cool, which are maybe not, what would you say? They're not the greatest thing in the world, but it's kind of cool. And that brings me to my next most carried knife. It's one that I haven't had for all that long. Some of you may have seen my first impressions on it. I have to say, though, this is a really nice knife. And this is using the RPM 9 steel, which is CJRB's sort of in-house version of 9CR18 MOV. And by all accounts, they've done a really good job. And it's nice to see this. I feel like 2 years ago, this would have been D2 guaranteed. So it's nice to see that move away from D2. I'm not a fan of coated blades. You guys know that. But this is only available, unless you get the White Mountain Knives. No. Unless you get the Knife Center. I think it's a Knife Center exclusive that has a stonewash finish. I would really like to see one in a satin finish. Maybe Justin from White Mountain Knives, if you want to do that, that would be pretty cool. But this is a really good knife, really nice, fairly affordable, very lightweight, easy to carry, decent materials, decent action. There's a lot to love. All right. The trend that I'd like to see die, the next trend is secondary market knives must be brand new. I've seen guys, anyway, I think the reason this becomes a problem to me is because it stops us from using our stuff. Now, if it's been abused and you've destroyed it and now you're going to sell it, no, that's not cool. And I understand that some of us, maybe most of us, are a little overextended on our knife budget because we don't know when to quit. And so we want to hold the value there as best we can so that we don't end up losing a ton of money on these things. I get all of that. However, all right, it essentially turns us into baseball card collectors. Like, our knives are just kept in a glass box and we just look at them and take them out to share pictures or trade them from time to time. And I feel like we're really missing out on a lot of the enjoyment from that. Now, I understand that high-end stuff in all its forms, whether it be high-end watches, high-end cars, whatever. A lot of times this approach is taken where we've got to be super, super careful to preserve as much value as we can. Um, but I would like to see the knife community become a little more practical and move a little bit away from, the only knives I ever buy on the secondary are knives that are like brand new. And then, the other part of me says, if you want a brand new knife, just go to the store and buy a brand new knife, right? So anyway, that's my rant about that. Next, and this is just me, but the use of fancy materials has really caught on with some of the Chinese companies. I'll leave this guy here for a second. Actually, let's switch it out because I do have another knife to get to that is completely contrary to the point I'm making. This is the Cold Steel Voyager. Really, really great budget option, truly hard use, ready for anything, capable knife. I absolutely love this thing. Anyway, I'll put it in as one of my. This has definitely been in my pocket a ton, but it totally contrasts with the point I want to make, and that is, a number of companies. We see it from Civivi, we see it to a lesser extent from We Knives, we see it a bunch these days from Concept Knives. They seem to be really loving it. But there's this trend for putting all of these fancy materials on our knives. It's got to be shiny. It's got to be squiggly, to use um, a phrase from Advanced Knife Bro, who I enjoy quite a bit. Anyway, all that squiggly stuff and fancy stuff and polished stuff, and especially, it almost hurts me when we put it in blades where we're going to now downgrade the performance of our blade steel in order to make it look fancy. That really bothers me, and I know I may get a lot of flack for this, but it's just, I would like to see that trend, and I guess it ties into the previous trend. I would like to see knives move in a more practical, usable direction. All right. Finally, um, just the sheer number of knife companies. Like, it seems like every time I go to bed and wake up, overnight there's been another Chinese knife company pop up, and they're making the same liner lock knives with G10 and ceramic bearings that every other Chinese knife company is making. And I'm sure they can do a good job. There's like Y something, and there's Yu-Gi-Oh, and maybe that's not, that's one of my kids' toys. Anyway, there are a bunch of, I wouldn't be surprised if it was also a knife company, to be honest. But there are so many of them, and Kubi, and anyway, there's so many of them, and they just sort of drown one another out to where I really have a hard time, and I rarely get knives from a company unless they do something that really, really stands out to me. I just don't care about these million and one Chinese companies. In fact, we don't even know if there's actually a million and one. They could all be coming out of the same factory and just be branding differently. And then finally, a trend I would like to see die, and I'm going to put in a knife that ties into the trend because it does have great action. This knife I've carried a ton. This is the Real Steel G frame. Phenomenal knife. This is one of the best things. This is probably my favorite White Mountain Knives exclusive. This is a great knife. It's really well put together. It's lightweight. It's classy. It's just fantastic. But it does have a great action. But the obsession with action, as long as it opens and it's moderately smooth, I don't really care. It's a tertiary feature at best. All right. Now, there are a couple of trends that I would like to say I like and enjoy. One of them is the desire for ever better blade steel. Now, not because I think blade steel makes a huge difference. In fact, I think for most of us, VG10, 154 cm, something like that is all we would ever need. But what's cool about it is the industry, or the consumer desire for better steel at a better price, does drive a certain amount of innovation. And so we're seeing, newer, better steels developed all the time. And that is something I really, really like, which I don't think would be happening if it weren't for our obsession with blade steel. The other trend that I like, and I was just complaining about it, but I kind of, am of two, and I decided to include both points because I know they're a direct contradiction to each other. But I find the pervasiveness of overseas manufacturers annoying. I also appreciate the downward pressure on the marketplace. So the reason you and I can get so many of the knives we like for such reasonable prices is because there are overseas competitors who are producing these things very affordably, and that puts pressure on the whole industry to keep the prices low. All right. Some have escaped that, right? I know there's like the Koenigs and Shiragorovs of the world that are, on a different level, but and really I'm surprised because Riot is about as good as anything they're doing, and there should be more downward pressure on the market exerted by Riot. But anyway, nonetheless, that's a different discussion. I do kind of like that. And I also like the one more trend that I like is that there's a larger and larger audience of knife, a larger and larger group of knife enthusiasts. There are new people that join. I'm a member of Canadian Knife and Gear. It's a really, really great group. And more new people are joining all the time, which to me is really, really encouraging. The number of accounts on Instagram, the number of views to the channel, the number of people I get asking me questions saying, hey, I'm new to the knife world. I love that trend, and I hope that that continues. I hope that it would continue in some other areas as well, but it's as long as we're talking about knives, I'll say that I appreciate that in the knife world. Also appreciate all of you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to check those channel sponsors. It does help me out a lot. We will talk to you soon.